It is 10:03, so we are going to go ahead and get started this morning. I just want to thank everyone for joining us for our monthly ECAP Recap webinar series. My name is Shanna Weber, and I am an environmental education specialist with the Environmental Assistance Branch here at the Kentucky Department for Environmental Protection. Um, and we're excited that you're able to join us this morning as we learn a little bit more about Kentucky's groundwater protection plans. Now, before I hand the presentation over to our guest speaker today and we dive into today's topic, I first want to do just a little bit of webinar housekeeping and then give you a short idea of what ECAP is, the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program, which is who is bringing you today's webinar, and how we might be able to help you in the long run. So first things first, if you are here with us and you can hear me and hopefully you can see my screen, feel free to put in the chat if you can't hear or you can't see the screen and I'll try to help you out. We should be pretty much good to go. Everyone besides our presenters are in listen only mode, so you will not have access to your microphone or camera. But if you do have any questions at all throughout the webinar, we ask that you do use the Q&A feature and we will try to get to them throughout the webinar. With that being said, I do also want to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded, and I will be working on sending out the recording as well as the presentations that are being used during today's webinar within the next few days. Just give me some time to gather everything, and I will be sending that out to the email address that you used to register today. So if you've been to an ECAP recap webinar before, I apologize. You've probably heard me give this spiel a couple of times, but I think it's something great to do for all of those who have not been able to join any of our webinars yet, and just give you an idea of what ECAP is. So ECAP stands for the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program, and I say this every single time. But if you take anything away from my short little talk today about ECAP, I want you to know that we are genuinely here to help out. So the program itself has two main objectives. The first is going to be to help businesses understand and comply with Kentucky's environmental requirements. And the second is going to be to provide free and confidential assistance to Kentucky's businesses. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of those goals in the next few slides. So there's a lot of acronyms that I could throw out there to you, and you probably won't remember any of them, and that's okay. But ECAP acts as Kentucky's Small Business Environmental Assistance Program, or that's what we call an SBEP. SBEPs are actually requirements of the Clean Air Act. So our program is funded primarily by facilities' air emission fees. And for that reason, we actually specialize in providing air quality assistance to small businesses in Kentucky. Now, SBEPs actually do have their own definition of a small business. They have to be less than 100 employees. They must be independently owned and operated. And then finally, they cannot be major sources of air emissions. Now, one of ECAP's major duties is going to be providing technical assistance. And as I mentioned in that last slide, one of our specialties is providing assistance to small businesses, specifically with questions related to air quality. Now, some of that technical assistance that we can do includes site visits, we can do potential emission calculations, and we can even work with small businesses and help them develop entire applications for air permits. We can help them fill out any required forms or help them with their record keeping as well. We can also help develop those record keeping and reporting spreadsheets for air permit requirements. So for example, this might be a rolling total spreadsheet or a visual emissions, a way to track that. Now, I have talked a lot about air quality, but Kentucky is a little bit special, and we have opted to make our SB program multimedia. So some states just focus on air quality, but we can actually focus on air, water, and waste. So we staff a phone and email hotline to take in any requests from companies and the general public. So if a facility or a company or even just a citizen has a question about any environmental topics, they can give us a call or send us an email. And if we don't necessarily know the answer to their questions, we can act as a referral service and we can find somebody that does know the answer for them. So whether that be, within the division of for air quality or waste management or water quality. Sometimes we get questions that our department doesn't even cover, but we will do our best to send those requests and those questions to somebody who can help out. We can provide general assistance in several water and waste topics. So we get a lot of questions about things like KPDES permits and hazardous waste. And as I said, if we don't know the answer, we can just act as that referral service. We can also help facilities identify if regulations may be relevant, and we can recommend that they review certain regulations to identify if those regulations are applicable for their operations. And we can also assist with new economic development projects. Again, we can help them identify potentially applicable permits, and we can get those facilities and we can try to get them into meetings with different divisions within the department. So DAQ, so Division for Air Quality, Division of Waste Management, and Division of Water. Now, I've talked a lot about that technical assistance, but one of the other things that ECAP does is educational outreach, and we create educational materials. So one thing that we do is develop educational documents, and we put them online for the public to view. Now, these documents can be everything from quick one-page fact sheets on new regulations or regulation changes to, I think right now I'm working on revamping, I think it's a 130-page workbook on dry cleaning facilities. So, I mean, it really varies on we can cover anything on any environmental topic. All of these documents are housed online in our resource library. And when we send this presentation out, that is going to be linked. So feel free to click on that and look around our online resource library. Now, we also hold training events and workshops like the one that you are attending today. So along with our ECAP Recap webinar series, we are also currently hosting our Air, Water, and Waste 101 series, which is an introductory level workshop regarding air, water, and waste regulations. This 101 series actually starts next week. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check out our website. These are all virtual for the spring. So we're hosting those online, and we would love for you to join us. Now, so far, I have talked a lot about what ECAP can do, but I also think it is important to know what we cannot do. So ECAP does not issue NOVs, even if issues are seen during a site visit. We do not make any sort of regulatory determination or give requirements. We do make recommendations to facilities. So as I said in the beginning, we really are here to help. We as a program have no regulatory authority. We also do not interfere with any inspector activity or anything that's covered in an inspection report. Our enforcement discretion does not supersede any of that, and I'm going to show you that enforcement discretion in the next slide. And then finally, ECAP cannot act solely as a corrective action or a remedial measure following an inspection report or an NOV. We can assist a facility meet the requirements, but ECAP cannot be the remedial measure in itself. Now, here's that enforcement discretion that I was talking about. I've mentioned a few times our services are confidential and we do not report on any potential violations outside of a few exceptions. If we see something that is going to cause severe harm to human health or the environment, that's one of those exceptions. So this is the enforcement discretion policy for specifically the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program that the Department for Environmental Protection made. It is important just to note that facilities that work with our program are given reasonable opportunities to correct any violations before they are brought to the regulatory agencies. And finally, I just like to end my short little talk about ECAP by showing off some of our accomplishments. Now, these actually need to be updated since we just got a lot of our data from the past year. But on average, we have about 1,100 assistance requests per year, with 115 of those being detailed assistances, meaning they take a little bit more time to solve or to help out. 54% of our follow-up survey respondents are small businesses. We've received a 96% positive rating from our respondents, with 94% saying that they would use ECAP again and recommend us to others. And 87% of our clients make changes based on recommendations that we give. Now, with all of that being said, if you have any additional questions about ECAP or any of the services that we offer, feel free to reach out to our hotline that I mentioned earlier that will be put up on the screen at the end of today's webinar. The number and email goes directly to ECAP staff members, and we would love to help you out. So now I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the floor over to our guest speaker today, Mr. Bronson McQueen. Bronson is a geologist that works for the Kentucky Division of Water Watershed Resources Branch. Bronson, thank you for joining us today, and I will go ahead and hand the floor over to you.
Thanks, Shanna. Like you said, my name is Bronson McQueen. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here to bring up my PowerPoint for today. We're going to be talking about groundwater protection plans today. So a little bit about me. My name is Bronson McQueen. I work for the Division of Water in the Watershed Resources Branch, Watershed Management Branch in the groundwater section. And just a little bit of background. I got my Bachelor's of Science in Geology from the University of Kentucky in 2021, and I'm currently working on my Master's at the University of Kentucky, looking at shallow groundwater flow and infiltration into karst environments. So groundwater is something very near and dear to my heart. It's what I do academically, and it's what I do as a career. So I would like to, try my best to make sure we protect our groundwater. Kentucky is a major karst state, which means access to groundwater can be rapid. So groundwater is constantly, susceptible to contamination, pollution from runoff, things like that. So I took over the Groundwater Protection Plan program in 2023, beginning of 2023, and I've been running it ever since. I love it. It's what I want to continue doing for at least the foreseeable future. So I want to make sure the program stays in a good, healthy environment and, keeps moving forward. So the opportunity to come speak at events such as this is a great way to get information out about the Groundwater Protection Plan program. So I'm gonna briefly go over groundwater in general, just for those who aren't, for some this may be a new term, for others, who have heard of groundwater but might not understand the importance of it. I would like to just kind of really get out all the information I can. I could go hours talking about groundwater, but we're going to split it up into just a few minutes. So one thing, probably the most important thing about groundwater is that it plays a major role in providing water to streams, lakes, ponds, rivers, wetlands. Really, almost any body of water in the state of Kentucky is going to have some sort of groundwater influence on it in most cases. So, it's important that we keep it clean, keep it healthy. And an example that I like to use is I live in Georgetown, Kentucky, and we pretty much everybody in the city limits of Georgetown, Kentucky, gets their drinking water from the Royal Spring, which is a groundwater fed spring in the city of Georgetown, literally downtown Georgetown, and it provides drinking water to about 39,000 people. And that number has grown significantly. Georgetown is one of the fastest growing cities in the state. In 2012, I think the population was 30,000. And now, as of 2024, I think official records say 39,000, but I'm pretty sure we've eclipsed over 40,000 people. So, in just a little bit over a decade, it's grown population by 10,000 people. So we really want to understand the groundwater there and, keep it clean, keep it safe, because a lot of people are drinking out of it. And the important thing about this system and a lot of other systems throughout, especially central Kentucky and the Midwest part of the state, such as like Warren County and Bowling Green, areas such as those, is that even if you don't use groundwater as your drinking water source, for example, like the Royal Spring in Georgetown is connected to northern Fayette County that doesn't use it as drinking water, but there's a lot of agricultural land, horse farms in northern Fayette County, and activities there can directly impact the drinking water in Georgetown. So it's a, even if you don't use the groundwater, it's important to know what you're doing because it can impact people miles away. So, with all that being said, uh, in 1994, the 401 KAR 537 was made, and this is the statute for groundwater protection plans. Um, and I will go into that briefly. I'm not going. This is available online. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because I don't think anybody in this call wants me to read a 2-page or more than 2-page statute to you. So we're just going to go over the briefs of it. So, groundwater protection plan, the regulation is for any facility or project which conducts activities with the potential of altering the physical, thermal, chemical, biological, or radioactive properties of the groundwater, shall prepare and implement a site-specific or generic groundwater protection plan upon commencement of the regulated activity. Well, we're going to get into this in a second. Basically, this means that if your site can impact groundwater, you technically need a groundwater protection plan. And what we'll learn later on is that almost every site in the state of Kentucky could use a groundwater protection plan, especially those that are in this inner bluegrass area or in areas towards Bowling Green where we have a lot of karst environments. So I'm going to jump into who needs a GPP. As you can see from this slide, we have from the Buc-ee's in Richmond, high schools, water treatment plants. We're going to break all this down and just kind of go over this. We won't go over every site that needs a GPP because we'd be here until the sun goes down, and I want to get lunch after this, so we're gonna keep it brief. Uh, so we'll start with the first one. Here is this one's important for a large amount of sites, especially agricultural sites, but it's any site that has the storage or handling of bulk storage of fertilizers or pesticides for commercial purposes or the purpose of distribution for retail sales outlets. So any large storage, agricultural sites will need it. Uh, there are specific exclusions for agricultural sites. We'll get in there later. But if you're bulk storing pesticides or fertilizers, you will need it. This is one that people don't tend to think of, especially I didn't think of it when I was going to my grandparents' house as a kid or teenager or anything. Any residences or businesses with home heating oil tanks or grease traps technically need a GPP. I have received GPPs from small mom and pop shops in rural parts of Kentucky that they have like a marina or they're a small restaurant and all they have is a grease trap, and they've sent us GPPs, and I love to see that because it's rare to see these small mom and pop shops even know about the GPP program. So it's nice to get a GPP from those, and technically they need it. Technically, if you have a leak in your grease trap, that can impact groundwater further down the line. This is another big one that up until I ran the program, I didn't know needed a GPP, even though I worked with drillers all the time, is domestic water wells technically need a GPP. And, most don't have it. And we're working to correct that, but people just don't know that they need it. Some drillers don't know that they need it. So a lot of these water well owners don't have one, and we'd love to get those on board. This is a fun little well. This was actually this was an image included in this original GPP presentation by predecessor, several people before me. But this is a well in Henry County that was drilled in 1829, and it's still in use. So that, yeah, I mean, it kind of goes. These wells can last a long time, and they can impact. I've been on the side of plenty of nasty wells. This isn't really one of them, but these wells can have a great impact on groundwater because they're drilled directly into the aquifer. So Oil and gas wells, all of them need it. We have a good amount of GPPs for oil and gas wells throughout the state, but prior to going to the Division of Water, I did work for the Division of Oil and Gas, working with their federal abandonment program. And I'll go and tell you, even though we have a lot of GPPs in for oil and gas wells, we have not even scratched the surface of all the GPP or all the oil and gas wells in the state. There are tens of thousands of wells out there that were drilled long before the GPP program was even an idea. So I've been working with some oil and gas companies trying to get these old wells pretty much covered by GPP. And there's a lot of work to be done in this specific field. And it's going to be a big focus that I have this year. This is another one that nobody thinks about. Technically, if you have a septic tank or on-site sewage disposal system, you should have a GPP by regulation. And that's just, I grew up in a house with a septic tank. Didn't know anything about GPPs. My parents still don't have a GPP, and I run the program. So that just goes to show that uh, we're not going to catch every GPP on in the state. I'm the only one really that runs this program, and I review all the GPPs. I make comments on them. I help develop them if people have want me to. So there's no way we can get a GPP for every place that needs a GPP in the state. I don't expect us to get GPPs for every home that has a septic tank. That's just not really feasible. But if a individual wants a GPP for their home septic tank, I am more than happy to review it and work with them on it. Uh, yeah. This is another big one that's died down in the past couple of decades, but still very relevant. Actually, our biggest GPP contributor in 2024 was a quarry facility. But any mining and mining associated activities need a GPP. In 2024, we worked with a quarry contractor that worked throughout the state to get about 20, I believe about 25 sites of theirs GPPs. You know, it was a big cooperative work to get all these done, but now they have a GPP when they had never had one as a company before, and now we have 25 sites all throughout from western all the way to the very east of Kentucky, covering their facilities, which is awesome. Uh, this one I added this one in. For most people, you'll never have to worry about this business wise. This one's a weird one because there are exceptions to this one, but the storage of related handling of road oils, dust suppressants, or de-icing agents at a central location, like a overhead kind of barn here. They need a GPP. There's a specific exclusion that goes with this that we'll get in later. But if you're working in transportation, or it's been a great year if you own a company that ices roads and plows roads. Just know that your storage of those materials should have a GPP. This is another one. A lot of this will be related to oil and gas tank batteries, but it's not just limited to that. But commercial or industrial storing or related handling in bulk quantities of raw materials, intermediate substances or products, finished products, substances held for recycling, or other pollutants held in tanks, drums, or other containers, or in piles. So that's a bunch of jargon, just kind of to have a blanket statement on almost anything can be covered under GPP. Technically, if you have a 55-gallon drum in your backyard that you use, it could fall under GPP. Porta potties, for example, every construction site that has a porta potty could fall under a GPP. This is kind of a catch-all, just if it could impact groundwater, it can have a GPP statement, and it should have a GPP. Now we're going to go over some exclusions, firefighting and firefighting materials. We don't cover those under the GPP. Stormwater impoundments. Going back a couple slides where we talked about de-icing materials. You do not need a GPP for the application of those de-icing materials, but you do need a GPP for the storage. Conveyance of materials, agricultural activities. Once again, kind of like the de-icing materials, you don't need a GPP for putting fertilizer on your crops or for your crops or anything like that. But if you're storing a ton of it, you do need a GPP. Uh, personal use items don't really need it if it's packaged in non-bulk supply. You're good. And then if the activity is completely contained in a uh, interior of a building that doesn't have a floor drains and it drains into a sewer system, you're good. You don't need a GPP. We're going to go into the components of the GPP next second. This next section, this part's probably the most important part of this talk, but probably the most boring. I'm going to be explaining a document to you, but it's important to talk about. So the GPP is made up of about 8 components. Before I get into talking about this, there's no structured format that's required for a GPP. I separated out like this because this is we have a guidance document on our website, and this is how it breaks it down. This is how I see most people submit it, is in these sections. But by no means are you required to submit a GPP that follows this exact order. It can be a single document that has all the information that you need. It can be technically it can be one big handwritten paragraph, and if it has everything it needs to, it would be fine for me to review and submit. So we're going to just go over the first section here, which is general information. This is where you're going to include the name, address, location, the person responsible for preparing the GPP, the person responsible for implementing the GPP, and a general description of the project or facility. All just basic stuff, easy to fill out, just, contact info, all that good stuff. This is the most important, the second most important section of the GPP, which is, any activities that could pollute groundwater. Do you have are you storing diesel gas on your site? Are you, um, you know, this is where I have a water well, I have a septic tank, I have a uh, grease trap, anything that can pollute groundwater is added into this section. And normally, how most GPPs go, or how most people find out that they need a GPP, is that they'll get an inspection from a DOW inspector. And if they don't have a GPP, the inspector will say, hey, you have this, this, and this going on here. You really need to submit a GPP for the site. And they're supposed to be giving my contact info now. They might not always give my contact info, but we do have a website that has all the information on it. And they'll say, hey, fill this out, get it sent in, and you'll be good to go. This section, this third section, is what is the actual most important, which is your practices selected to protect groundwater from pollution, or your best management practices, best management plans. This is where you say, yes, I do have a 500-gallon diesel tank, but I have secondary containment around that tank. Just if you're working for a facility, just the best management practices that you have to ensure to the best of your ability that if something were to happen, a release were to happen, something were to break, cracks were to form, that you had the best practices implemented to prevent that from spreading to the groundwater, from contaminating the groundwater. Yeah. So the GPP can be included with other regulatory paperwork. It's a lot of times, especially now, stormwater protection plans and stuff like that will say, hey, submit a GPP with this. So if you are working on your regulatory paperwork for another program, but they ask for a GPP, feel free to submit a GPP along with anything else. It will normally get to me one way or another. The next section is the implementation schedule. This is just pretty much unless we get a GPP for a construction site, a site that's not been established yet, the implementation schedule is, hey, these are in place now, basically every time. Now, if we get a site that isn't built yet or is under construction, the implementation schedules basically say, hey, the GPP will be in effect upon X date when the facility opens. It's as easy as that. Um, we ask that with your GPP, you include employee training. If you have employees, this isn't applicable to everybody. If it's a small mom and pop shop where it's mom and pop running it, we don't expect to see an employee training uh, regiment on there. It's not really necessary, but for larger facilities, this is your safety training that you give to your employees. Is it up? And we ask, oh, are you training them every 6 months, every year, every other year? Just like that. It's really just so we can get an idea on if the employees are aware of the um, potential groundwater hazards that the site has. Um, the inspection checklist, kind of the same thing, but this is just a general checklist of, how often are you checking, your secondary containment, for example. What are you looking for? Are you looking for cracks? Are you looking for, splits in the seams? Whatever. What are all are you looking for? And then we ask that you don't have to submit to us any field inspections on the GPP, but we ask that you keep your field inspections with your GPP, just in case anything ever happens. That way you can cross your T's, dot your I's, say, hey, we checked the secondary containment back in March of 2024. It was fine. And in April, we had a release. Everything's good to go on our end. It's an unfortunate thing that happened, but we were following our proper procedures. Uh, this is a requirement on all GPPs that gets left out on first submission, probably like 80% of the time. It's just a general certification statement that is a signature and a date that says you have read 401 KAR 537 and you certified that the GPP follows it. It's all it is. It gets left out all the time, and I'll just, if you submit one, it doesn't have this, I'll just email you back, say, hey, can you sign this statement for me and attach it to your GPP? It's not a big deal. It's just this way we know you've read through the statute, and what we know that that you've read it. And then I believe the final section, yeah. The final section is a record retention requirement. We require that all GPP records are held for 6 years. They can be publicly requested. I believe you have like 30 days, I think. I think it's 30 days to submit records for if it's requested by the public. So that's the boring how to fill out a document and what's on the document part of the presentation. I know that's a little bit of a slog, but I'm just going to talk now as we're kind of getting into the end of the presentation. I'm just going to talk about some other things about the GPPs. We have a website that I believe is linked. I have the link at the end of this presentation. But we do have a website. If you just look up Kentucky GPP, it will take you right to the EEC website for it that has all the information. But we have generic GPPs, which are kind of pre-drafted GPPs that cover very specific sites that won't be applicable to everybody, but for those who it is applicable to, it's very useful. It was prepared by one of my predecessors through DOW, and it's available on the webpage. You can just download it. It'll be a Word file, and then you can just either print it off and fill out what you need or fill it in through, I think we have a question. I don't know. I'll answer questions at the end because I don't know how to see them. But these are made through DOW, and they're on our webpage. uh, and they're very helpful if they fall under what you need, which is these very specific things: the residential septic systems and on-site sewage disposals, home heating oil tanks, domestic water wells, monitoring wells, uh, information for drillers. And then the really weird one that I've never seen a GPP in for, but there has to be a reason why it was important enough for us to make a generic GPP for, which is poultry operations on less than 10 acres. Um, I would love to see one of these submitted. I haven't yet, but at one point in time, they were important enough for us to make a generic GPP, a decade ago or so. Um, and now I just kind of want to get into the benefits of a GPP, um, which is for a facility that, especially these small mom and pop facilities, it helps identify uh, any potential environmental hazards that they may not have even have recognized before. When I was, growing up, I mean, of course, septic tanks have, their own issues and concerns. It is septic waste, but I didn't really think, anything about it as a kid growing up or even as a young adult of, what happens if there is a failure in that septic tank. Well, my yard's going to stink and I'm going to have to do a lot of cleanup. But I never thought about, well, what goes on 5 miles down the road when septic waste pops up in somebody's spring or somebody's drinking water. So it's important to know the hazards you have on site. It really is. Um, and, that goes along with, having a clear path for protecting groundwater, which is really such an important resource for the state and a lot of Kentuckians. It provides some liability protection. This isn't a program designed to, say, hey, you need to do this, yada yada yada. This is a program designed to say, hey, we want to make sure that we're keeping our resources safe, but also if you do this, you have some sort of document to say, hey, I'm putting my best management plans forward. I'm following proper protocols. This is what I need to do, and we're doing it right. So it gives you some sort of liability protection. It can save you money in the long run because if you don't have secondary containment or some sort of best management practice, um, and you don't have a GPP, if you have a release that could cost you a lot of money in the long run. Uh, but if you follow GPP and you have secondary containment, you have your best management practices, the effects of a release or something of that extent will be much less. Um, Provides good public relations and complies with the law. The fun generic comments there. Just it's good. It's good to have one. Let's see. Fast facts. Anybody familiar with the operation of the facility or project can draft a GPP. So you don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be a geologist. You don't have to have any sort of license to fill out a GPP. My 17-year-old brother can fill out a GPP if, he worked at a site that needed one and he was familiar with the operations. He can make one. Anybody can do it. This isn't limited to, this is supposed to be helping the public, not trying to drive a hammer and be a super hard regulatory facility, a regulatory program. We're out here to help people not, you know, enforce rules, which, there is a extent of that, but our main goal is just to help people. GPPs are valid for 3 years, or so every 3 years you'll need to submit a new GPP or keep a GPP on record. You don't have to submit it into the state if you don't want to. You just have to have it on site. It has to be available upon request. I think it's 7 days upon request. 30 days for a new site, 7 days for a pre-existing site, I believe. Um, or if there's any major change in the facilities, like it transferred ownership, or somebody installed something new on the site, or you added a tank onto your site, that needs to be updated and reflected in your GP. Like I said, if the facility is transferred, the previous owner should give all the GPP information to the new owner, and GPPs are public record. I think we went over this a little bit earlier. So if somebody from the public requests a GPP from a site, they can do that, and the owner of the site is required to provide a GPP within 30 days. Let's see. I'm available to help with any GPP questions that you have. I've helped dozens of people across the state draft GPPs. I've helped review them, go over what needs to be done. I can do site inspections. I've done a few of those. So really, any GPP questions that you have or any GPP help you need to have, you can contact me. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. As I said earlier, GPP is for the employees, not the regulators. We really, our end goal is just to make sure that we're protecting groundwater resources. We're not going to come out there and yell at you for not having secondary containment. We're not going to go out there and, write you up for anything. I like to work personally with the employees, with the owners, with whoever will work with me, and just get this document together so we can have an idea of how we can protect our resources. And an acceptance letter is issued once I've reviewed the GPP and said, hey, it's good to go. You're not missing anything. Everything looks good. You'll get an acceptance letter. That way you can keep it with your records in case an inspector comes by or anything like that. Let's see, GPP program activities. Like I said, I provide assistance with GPPs. I review them. I can do field reviews, and I can also do things like today where, I'm talking about education and outreach. This is a big part of my job now, especially the education and outreach. I'm continuing to try to get the word out about the GPP program because for a while, there wasn't really anybody running it. So the program, it didn't die out, but support for it definitely went down. Is 2023, when I took over the program, we had 12 total GPPs submitted for that year. And then in 2024, we upped that to, I think the ending number was 55. And my goal is just to keep my goal is actually just to keep growing the program until it gets too big for one person to run. And that's what I would love to see. I would love to see, eventually thousands of sites across Kentucky have GPPs, because I believe it's something important that we have all together, just to keep groundwater protected and to really expand the education of how important groundwater is to the state of Kentucky. Field reviews, these are rare. I've done them a few times just because right now I'm one person. I can't go out to hundreds of sites across the state and do field reviews. But if somebody asks me to, or, we have an inspector that has a lot of concern about a site, which is the main reason why I normally go do these field reviews, I'll go out, I'll talk to the owner or manager or, whoever's going to be in charge of putting together that GPP. I'll walk with them to the site. I'll point out areas where, we may have groundwater concerns, and then I'll work with them to draft that GPP, and I'll evaluate it, and we'll eventually get it done, and we'll get it submitted. And that way, next time the inspector comes out there, he'll say, hey, great job on getting that GPP. We're making progress. And here's our contact information. Mine's right there with my phone number and email. Adam Smith is my supervisor. So if you can't get a hold of me or you want to talk to somebody else, there's his contact information. He's very knowledgeable on the GPP program as well. But I think that is all that I have. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you guys may have, or anything really. This program is important to me, and I think it's important to the state. So I want to clear up anything that you guys might have about it.
Thank you, Bronson. It looks like we do have a few questions in the chat. I think you kind of covered this one earlier, but someone said, are you saying everyone who has a well, including individual homeowners, needs a GPP?
So by the statute, yes. Does that mean I expect every homeowner who has a well to submit a GPP? No. Um, it's just there's several tens of thousands of uh, drinking water wells and monitoring wells throughout the state. It's literally impossible for them to all submit a GPP and for those to be reviewed. Uh, the way this works with the well regarding a GPP is normally if somebody has, especially on older wells that may not have been installed correctly, if somebody has problems with their drinking water from that well, we'll normally go out there. If we sample it, and they get a hit on something or they have major concerns about their groundwater or their drinking water, I'll recommend a GPP. I don't really ever expect to actually get a huge number of well GPPs, but it's it's technically required, but we're not going to go hunt every water well owner in the state and ask for a GPP.
Great. The next one is what is the difference between a GPP and an SPCC plan? So I believe that's a spill prevention control and countermeasure plan.
They're very similar. The major differences. I think I'm not too familiar with the formatting of the SPCCs because I don't review them. But I think the major difference is the just regulation and statute that they're in. It's technically two different um, programs. But I think there's some differences in what needs to be considered in both of them because I think SPCCs also consider surface water, where GPPs do not. And also, I think there's a little bit difference on like the requirements for both of those.
Great, thank you. And then the next, do you need a GPP if you already have an SWPPP? So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, a stormwater pollution prevention plan.
Yeah. So a lot of those stormwater, the SWPPPs, I believe a lot of them are asking you to include a GPP in them now. Uh, they are like kind of like with the SPCC, they are two different um, statutes and regulations. So I would say yes, you do need a GPP, even if you have an SWPPP. Uh, what I've seen, I've worked with a couple of places that have had these stormwater plans already, and they want to go and submit their GPPs. They'll just submit a slightly modified stormwater plan that covers what's needed for the GPP.
Great, thank you. And then we had somebody ask about the website for the downloadable GPP generic plans. Allison, who's actually one of our ECAP staff members, has put that into the chat. So thank you, Allison. And then the next question was also about the hotline phone number and email address. So that goes straight to ECAP staff. If you had a question about GPPs, most likely we would forward you on to Bronson or even Adam to help answer those questions. But in the chat as well. Let's see. It doesn't look like we have any other questions yet in the chat, but feel free to put them in there. I did see earlier somebody had their hand raised, so I don't mind to unmute you if you want to ask a question really quick. Just feel free to raise your hand and I can do that. We'll take a few more minutes just to see if any other questions come in. Let's see. It looks like we've got one. Do all GPPs need to be submitted for approval?
No, so technically you don't have to submit a GPP at all. It's not a requirement to submit it. It's a requirement for it to be held on site, but not a requirement to submit it to the state. We recommend submitting it to the state just so I can review it, or so Adam can help review it to just make sure that everything is there that needs to be there, just in case it gets inspected. But no, you don't have to submit it at all. Not at all. They're just required to be held on site. And then I think I saw one in the Q&A panel that says, why would we need a SWPP and GPP? Also thought both needed updated every 5 years. So the GPP is every 3 years per the KAR 401 KAR 537 is every 3 years. I not too familiar on the requirements of the SWPPP, but just on why you need both, I it's really just because it's two different programs. They're not they are very similar. That's why a lot of times people will submit a modified SWPPP as a GPP. They are very similar. It's just two different branches that work on those. I think SWPPPs are done under the water supply, I think, branch, and GPPs are done with the groundwater branch. It's just two different programs at the end of the day. But they are very similar. They are extremely similar.
Great. Any other questions? Oh, we have a couple more minutes. Oh, there's another one. If the GPP is addressed in the SWPPP, does the updating fall under the SWPPP requirement of 5 years versus the 3-year requirement for the GPP?
So GPP is addressed when the updating. So if okay, so I see. So if you're submitting, we do occasionally get where people submit a GPP with the SWPPP. That does happen, and what normally happens there is I receive the GPP part, or sometimes the entire document. I've only had this happen a couple times, but what we would do in that case is that um, you would still be required to update the GPP at the 3-year requirement point, but you where it doesn't have to be resubmitted into the state, or it doesn't have to be, uh, you're not required to resubmit your SWPP for 5 years, and you're not required to submit your GPP. You can just send your updated GPP in the updated SWPP at the end of the 5 years. I hope that made sense. That was a lot of letters put together. Just
A lot of acronyms right there, right?
a lot of acronyms, yes. So basically, you don't have to resubmit the GPP at the 3 years. Just resubmit it at the 5 years, updated at the 3 years, though. Just in case an inspector goes out and asks for it.
We just got a question. Will the recording of this webinar be made available for later access? Yes, it will. I've been recording the webinar, and the recording, as well as the presentations from today's webinar, will be sent to all of the attendees. I'll try to get that to everyone, hopefully by either the end of the day today or tomorrow. Let's see, I'm not seeing any more questions, but of course, oh, let's see. We had someone say it would be nice for the industry if the permits were all on the same frequency. I can definitely see that as well.
I would also agree. Unfortunately, I don't. I was not there. I was not even alive yet when they made the GPP statute. But I wish it followed the same as the SWPPP because they are virtually the same document at the end of the day. It'd be nice if they were on the same submission period as well.
Awesome. So as I was saying, I'm not seeing much else, but if you do have questions that you think of, later on today or, a week from now and you're thinking about your GPP, I know Bronson wouldn't mind at all for you to reach out to him. His contact information, again, is included in the presentation that I'll be sending out, and he just put his email in the chat. So feel free to shoot him an email. And again, if you have any other general questions about any other environmental topics, we have our hotline number that Allison put in the chat, and that is also included in the presentations that we'll be sending out as well. So I just wanted to take a second to thank Bronson again for joining us this morning. I've heard this presentation a few times now, and I feel like I've learned something new every single time. So we really do appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and share your knowledge and let us know a little bit more about groundwater protection plans.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
With that being said, I did want to go ahead and let you all know of some of our upcoming events for ECAP. So what you should see on your screen are a list of our upcoming events. As I mentioned earlier on, we have our Air, Water, and Waste 101 series happening. It's starting next week. You don't have to go to all of them. You can pick and choose which ones you want to go to. Our next ECAP recap webinar will be covering asbestos in Kentucky, and that takes place on March 12th. And then our April webinar, our topic is coming soon, so be on the lookout for that as well. And then finally, here is that hotline phone number and email that we mentioned several times today. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us, and we would be more than happy to help out. But with that being said, that is all that we have for you all this morning. We thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Bronson again. We hope you have a great rest of your day and hope that you will join us again soon for another webinar or workshop. Thank you all.